Hare Krishna. So today morning, we are discussing from the Shrimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 10. And I will write and draw certain things to explain some points. So generally, whenever I give a one-off Bhagavatam class, so I try to use a 3-point framework called Chit to understand. So C, Chit means consciousness. So we want to expand our consciousness by studying the Bhagavatam. So C is the context. We'll try to understand what is going on in the context. Then I is the implication. What does it imply? What does it mean? And then T is the takeaway. So what is it that we can learn or apply for our lives? So context, implication, and takeaway for us. So when let's apply this framework to this particular section. And I also so now here we are in the second canto of the Shrimad Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam itself has 12 cantos and 335 chapters. Now we are in the second canto, and second canto has how many chapters? 10. So we are in the 10th chapter. Now in the 10th chapter, we are right now in the 17th text. So what is happening over here? Basically, the discussion between Parikshit Maharaj and Shukdev Goswami starts from the second canto. Parikshit Maharaj appears at the end of the first canto, and the first words he speaks start from the second canto. And the Bhagavatam itself, discussions can be of, the Bhagavatam is a discussion, it is samvad. Now discussions can be structured or they can be organic or spontaneous. Now, what is the difference? A structured discussion is like an interview. See, there's a list of questions, and sometimes even the interviewer, not sometimes, most of the time the interviewer is given the questions in advance. And then quite often the interviewer prepares the answers. So it's sometimes called like a scripted discussion. So sometimes some politicians, when they are doing interviews, they may even have some board where they have actually the answers displayed to them. So they're actually reading out the answers. So that's more of a structured discussion. Not a bad thing, structured discussion. Now spontaneous discussion is something what we might call as a podcast. So when we have a podcast, it is, some frame might be there, but a podcast is not like an interview. It is, as the discussion moves, it's like one person is asking questions, the other person giving answers. But it's a more natural, free flow kind of discussion. So if we consider the Bhagavatam, in which category would it fall? Broadly? More of a podcast. So it is not exactly a podcast. It is. But it would fall more in that direction. In many ways, it is not that Shukdev Goswami comes with a plan that he is going to speak for 7 continuous days to Parikshit Maharaj. Parikshit Maharaj's primary question is, what should I do at the time of death? And Shukdev Goswami answers that question. Shrotavyadini Rajendranam Sati Sahasrasha. There are people who discuss hundreds of subjects, but what we should discuss about is Krishna. So now, in many ways, Shukdev Goswami's purpose in coming there, or at least the initial purpose we can say, is to answer the question, not implement the answer. There are two different things. Like somebody is sick and a friend comes and says, okay, I think for this disease Ayurveda will help. Okay, do you know any Ayurvedic clinic? Can you take me to that Ayurvedic clinic? Can you stay with me while I'm taking the treatment? Hey, I didn't think I would have to do all that, isn't it? So it's one thing is So when we consider Shukdev Goswami, one is giving the answer. So giving the answer happens very briefly in the first chapter of the second canto itself. In 2.1 itself, the answer is given more or less. But then the second is implementing the answer. So the answer is that a person at the time of death should focus on hearing about Krishna. So implementing the answer means that you help me to hear about Krishna, how? You speak about Krishna, and I'll hear. So now it is not a plan that Shukdev Goswami is going to be there with Parikshit Maharaj for 7 full days. And in fact, if we go towards the end of the Bhagavatam, it is interesting that we have Bhishma Pitamaha surrounded with his loved ones and the sages and the Lord when he departs. Now it is so it's that is there, but when Parikshit Maharaj departs, Shukdev Goswami is not there with him. In the 11th canto, in the 12th canto, if you read, Shukdev Goswami departs. And then Shukdev Goswami finishes the discussion, Shukdev Goswami leaves, and then the snake bird comes and bites. So is it that Shukdev Goswami doesn't want to be there with Parikshit Maharaj at the last moment? The point is that Shukdev Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj both are confident that Parikshit Maharaj's consciousness is absorbed in Krishna. He has spoken the message of Krishna and he is absorbed in Krishna. So as the discussion of the Bhagavatam moves forward, it moves forward primarily based on the questions of Parikshit Maharaj. So around the 6th chapter of the 2nd canto, it is more or less like the discussion is over and Parikshit Maharaj asks further questions, and when further questions are asked, that is when the actual discussion takes off. Or not the actual discussion, I would say. That's how the discussion keeps continuing. So it is more like you could say the Bhagavatam is more like a question-led discussion. So it's not so much a speaker has come with a class, has come with a class prepared. So like some speakers may speak for 1.5 hours and then after that there's not much time for question answers. Some speakers may speak for only 10 minutes and then if there's no question, the class ends in 10 minutes. So Parikshit Maharaj, Shukdev Goswami is like that. He gives a very brief talk, but Parikshit Maharaj keeps asking questions. And when the questions are being asked, accordingly the discussion moves forward. So generally speaking, the Bhagavatam is known for its pastimes, especially the 10th canto is considered the heart of the Bhagavatam, and that's what most Bhagavad Kathas focus on. And there are some other Leelas also. So there are some other sections in the Bhagavatam where also the Bhagavatam seems to take a very different approach. So broadly speaking, when say the Bhagavatam is meant to cultivate Krishna consciousness, to help Parikshit Maharaj remember Krishna. Now, Krishna consciousness can be cultivated in 2 distinct ways. One is that we bring Krishna into our consciousness. So this is standard. For example, we have come to the temple and we look at the deities, we chant the holy names, we hear about Krishna. We bring Krishna into our consciousness. And this is largely done through the Leela in the Bhagavatam. So how Krishna consciousness is cultivated in the Bhagavatam. But there is another equally important approach, that is bring what is in our consciousness to Krishna. Bring what is in our consciousness to Krishna. So what does this mean? That there are many things which we already know, which are already present in our consciousness. And then, if we can connect them with Krishna. So, For example, in India, cricket is very popular. So if we want to talk some spiritual concepts, if we give cricket examples, then cricket is already in the mind of people. Then what happens is, okay, you can connect it easily. Or we can give examples of what is called as Loka Praman, Aitihya, Aitihas. So each place has its local stories, local culture. So for example, if we speak in India, we may talk about the Indian independence struggle. If somebody is going to America, and they may talk about American political leaders. There's one devotee who in Africa who is writing a book on African proverbs and explained or commented on from a Vedic perspective. So the African proverbs are very common in the minds of Africans. And then we give, okay, how do we make sense from a Vedic perspective? So Prabhupada would give explanations using, say, stories of Gopal Ban. Now, that was something, it is there in the Bengali culture, and Prabhupada is using that. Or sometimes we may tell Akbar Birbal stories. Whatever. So what is in our mind, we bring it to Krishna. So the Bhagavatam uses this approach primarily in the second canto, third canto, and fifth canto. In the second canto, it uses it through the concept of the Virat Rupa. The third canto, it uses it through the concept of Sankhya. In the fifth canto, it uses it to the concept of the Brahmanda, the cosmology and the cosmography. So, now in this case, what is happening is, especially let's take the fifth canto example, then the second canto will become easier. Parikshit Maharaj has lived in a time where he already has some knowledge of the cosmos. And thus, when he's asking questions also, his questions also have some information, some background over there. And based on that, he is saying, okay, how do you understand this? How do I understand that? If you see, Parikshit Maharaj knows that he's going to die in 7 days. And with only few days, probably 2 or 3 days are over by the time the fifth canto is coming, he is not interested in getting a PhD in cosmology. Isn't it? So his interest is in remembering Krishna. So when he's asking questions about cosmology, the questions are not so much about cosmology, it is more about how to see Krishna through cosmology. And that's why even when the cosmos is described, the focus is more on how dharma and devotion pervade the cosmos. So for example, Jambudvip will be described, and the cosmographical aspect, graphy is measurement, cosmographical aspect is that, okay, how long is this, how far is this from here, how far is that, what are the physical topographical features. All that is described in 5-6 verses, and the major 30-40 verses of the chapter are the prayers offered by the residents of Jambudvip. So the focus is not so much on that, okay, what is there in Jambudvip or where is Jambudvip? The focus is what are people doing in Jambudvip. So this focus, so through the cosmos we see Krishna. So like say if a devotee preacher goes on a world speaking tour, goes to America, goes to Europe, Australia, then the focus of that devotee, if the devotee comes and describes how was your tour, the focus is not going to be, oh, we went and saw the Eiffel Tower, we saw the Statue of Liberty. The focus will be, okay, how all over the world there are temples, how all over the world there are devotees, how bhakti is being practiced all over the world. So that bring what is in our consciousness to Krishna. So what does it mean? So broadly, if we consider, let's understand this once again, that if this is the spiritual world and the material world below, we are in the material world. So Krishna consciousness can be cultivated. One way is we turn away from the world toward Krishna. And the other is we go through the world toward Krishna. That means what is in the world, we don't turn away from it, but we see through it or beyond it to Krishna. So, in a practical sense, we may say that when we are practicing bhakti, there's a time when we are doing a sadhana, we turn away from everything else. Even if we have family, we turn away from the family in the sense that we focus on Krishna at that time. But throughout the rest of the day, okay, I have my family. The family members are also Krishna's family members. They are all Krishna's parts. So I should interact with them, seeing them as Krishna's parts and seeing how I can serve Krishna by serving them. So we turn away from the world to absorb ourselves in Krishna. And even when we turn toward the world, we turn to the world in a mood of connecting with Krishna through the world. So this particular chapter, the Virat Rupa, several of the chapters in this canto, they are taking which of the two approaches? The second approach. Turn through the world to Krishna. So with this context in mind now, so the context is that Krishna consciousness is being encouraged or fostered through a concept that was already known to Parikshit Maharaj. The concept is the Virat Rupa. And so the Virat Rupa is not something which is unknown at those times. Like the Virat Rupa is one of the, apart from Krishna as the Supreme Lord, the concept of Virat Rupa is one of the most repeated concepts in the Bhagavatam. That means almost every major prayer, not all prayers, but almost major prayers. Major means those prayers more than 20-30 verses. We will see that there is some reference to the Virat Rupa in that. So this is the context. So what was already known to Parikshit Maharaj, the Virat Rupa. Now how does that concept of Virat Rupa connect us with Krishna? We say it is Krishna's Virat Rupa. Okay, that is true, but exactly how is the Virat Rupa connected with Krishna? So that is what is being further established, explained over here. So let's look at the implication of this now. So the implication, there is a fundamentally there are two approaches to knowledge. What are the two? Whenever we want to gain knowledge, knowledge is a combination of two things. What is and what it means. Whenever we want to get understanding, we need to have these two things. What is happening and what it means. So, for example, if we hear, oh, there's a bomb blast in another part of the city. Okay, that is news. That may be important news. Now what does it mean? Or there was not a bomb blast, there's some explosion. So the explosion is there, that's a fact. But from the fact, what is the meaning? Now, the meaning could mean, is there a terrorist attack? Is that attack targeting religious places? Does that mean we are in danger? Does that mean we have to shut down? Or it could mean, okay, that was due to some chemical explosion. So now, what is refers to facts. And what it means refers to the meaning, the significance. In general, for example, if somebody is angry and somebody is yelling at us. Now the fact is that person is angry. But the meaning often is, you say, what is the meaning is angry? No, why is the person angry? Is it because of something I did? Is it because the person is short-tempered? Is it because something else happened to the person and the person is taking it out on me? No, so in general, if we want to get any understanding, any kind of deeper understanding requires understand the facts and understand the significance of those facts. So what is and what it means. Now, traditionally in philosophy, there have been two approaches. That one is you start with facts and move towards their significance. So facts are specific. So basically we start with the specifics and then move toward the universals. So start with specifics, move towards universal means that, say, if some person speaks very loudly, like say if you travel across the world, then last 10-12 years I have been almost 8-9 months a year I'm outside India. So I have experienced different cultures. So for example, in different cultures, when two people talk with each other, there is what is considered to be like the polite distance between two people. Some people keep a significant distance and talk with each other and say don't intrude into somebody else's personal space. So in some cultures, the polite distance, the personal space is considered to be quite large. The two people may be talking, but they are a significant distance away. In some cultures, the personal space is not that much, so people come very close to each other and talk. Now what happens imagine if one person is from a culture where the personal space is a lot, and the other person is from a culture where the personal space is very less. So if you look at the discussion that is happening, it seems that the two people are talking, but one person is moving forward, the other person is moving backward. One person is moving forward, the other person is moving backward. So what is happening over here is that the specifics may be different. The specifics is, okay, how much distance between two people. The universal is that there is some personal space. And so in some ways, we may start with facts and then move toward the significance of the facts. That is one approach to philosophy. The other approach is, we start with universals. And from there, we move towards specifics. We start with universals and move towards specifics. So, for example, let's start with, say, we meet a person from a completely new community. We don't know about that community. Maybe there's a faith called Baha'i faith. It's one of the major religions of the world, but not a big religion actually. One of the religions of the world. So if we meet someone from the Baha'i faith, now we don't know anything about the Baha'i faith, so we will look at the specifics. And we'll try to understand the specifics, and then we will try to make sense. Okay, is this personal? Is this impersonal? Where does this fall? What kind of faith is this? On the other hand, sometimes if we already know, we may think, okay, a particular group of people are very fanatical. So we may start with the universals. Now the universals may or may not be correct. But then, okay, these people are a bit narrow-minded. But if we start with the universals and then come to the specifics. But within that, not everybody may be narrow-minded like that. So broadly speaking, say if we meet someone and from the way they are dressed or from their overall appearance, we think that this person may not know English. And so we may start speaking with them in the local language. So based on dress, appearance, conduct, overall, we might think that this person belongs to a particular category. Now it may turn out that person who seems to be dressed very simply might have a PhD in English. And their English might be better than ours also. Isn't it? But the point is, we need to categorize to make sense. We need to categorize to make sense of things. So categories are more about universals. Okay, this person is a South Indian, this person is a North Indian. This person is English speaking, this person is Hindi speaking or Telugu speaking. So there are specifics and there are categories. So now this might seem a detour, but I'll come to the point I'm making, that in general, within the Bhagavatam, when we are thinking about remembering Krishna, so we can move towards from the specifics to the universals or universals to the specifics. So what does it mean, specifics toward the universals? Say if we already know Krishna Lila, we are hearing some story, and that same story which you have heard many times is being narrated again. Then the focus is on the specifics. Okay, how the story is narrated, are any new details being told? Is the narration having some specific mood, ambience, tone, and from that the universal is the remembrance of Krishna comes. And now if we go to, say, a place like America, where people have not heard about Krishna at all, then we may have to start with universal before we get to specifics. I was giving a talk in America on, it was in Australia, it was in the Damodar month was going on. So there were some Western audiences also over there. So I could see that there was one middle-aged Western Mataji, and she seemed to be very uncomfortable while I was giving the talk. And as I was speaking, she seemed to become more and more uncomfortable. So, because there are not many non-Indians, so then I just wanted to make her a little more comfortable. So I asked, is there any problem? She said, any problem? Everything is a problem. He said, what do you mean? See, this whole story you people are enjoying, this whole story is a story of child abuse. The idea that a child is being tied and you are all enjoying it. What kind of perverse people are you? Now, no mother can have as much love for a child as Yashoda has for her son. And what she is doing is the farthest away from child abuse. But what happens is, if there is no framework in which to understand it, then the specifics can be very confusing. So sometimes we may have to start from the universals before we get to the specifics. So when the Virat Rupa discussion is going on, Parikshit Maharaj already knows much of the specifics. And the focus is on the universals. What does all this mean? So now the problem for us, when we are trying to understand it, is we don't know the specifics. We don't know the specifics, and from there we are trying to understand the universals. So, say if somebody uses cricket metaphors to explain some spiritual concepts, and say somebody has come from America. When I first went to America in 2014, one of the local program organizers told me, don't use any cricket examples. I said, why is that? He said, for Americans, cricket is an insect. It is not a game. There's an insect which makes sound, it's called cricket. But they don't know about the game called cricket at all. So, if some cricket examples are used, they'll not be able to understand anything. If somebody, in India somebody uses baseball examples, you may not know even what is baseball. So the thing is that if the specifics are not known, then when we go from the specifics to the universals, it becomes very difficult to understand. So that's why some sections of the Bhagavatam can be quite difficult to understand. Again, the second canto, the third canto, and the fifth canto. The Sankhya philosophical section is difficult to understand. The Brahmanda darshan is probably most difficult to understand. Brahmanda analysis, the cosmography section is probably the most difficult to understand. And this Virat Rupa section is also difficult to understand. So, having said this, now the question comes up, do we need to understand the specifics to understand the universals? The universal is to remember Krishna. The specific is, okay, what is the cultural context through which the remembrance of Krishna is happening? So, let me give another example to illustrate this point. That whenever any kind of understanding is to happen, there is something called a ladder of abstraction. Now, I may use a lot of terms, but these are very simple concepts. So, this is a ladder of abstraction. So, that means, see, at the bottom of this are specifics. At the top of it are universals. So again, at the bottom of this are specifics. So last year when I had gone to America, this was just after the Ayodhya temple had been inaugurated. And so many times, especially from Americans, I got this question that, what is happening in India? He said that there was a mosque that was destroyed and a temple is built after destroying the mosque, and the whole country is celebrating that. Even the Prime Minister is going to celebrate that. He says this is a celebration of intolerance. Now we tell them that actually the mosque was built by destroying a temple. And he said, that happened in medieval times. The past times were quite barbaric. And, if we start correcting all the wrongs that were done in the past, when are we going to stop with all this? So, now in America, there's a lot of accusation of racial injustice. In the past, blacks were enslaved. So I said, right in the politics, aren't you considering that should there be some kind of, they don't have reservations, they have diversity quota, affirmative action. Some of them are thinking of reparations also. He says, shouldn't we correct the past historical wrongs? Isn't that what you are doing also with respect to racial injustice? But one point that came up over there is, Hindus and Muslims are constantly fighting with each other in India. And their idea, this is the mainstream press coverage in the West, is quite leftist, biased against India. So they say, okay, Muslims have the Quran, and based on that there is the concept of jihad. And Hindus have the Bhagavad Gita, and that is a book which is actually meant to incite people to fight. The Arjuna, there's one American person who told me, I read the Bhagavad Gita. He said, I like Arjuna, I don't like Krishna. So why? He said, Arjuna's arguments make sense, don't fight a war. And Krishna is telling him to fight a war. So the idea over there is that Krishna is instigating people to fight. So now, is the Bhagavad Gita a violence or a war-inducing book? No, why? Because it's our book and we don't want it to induce war? No. See, in the Bhagavad Gita, yes, specifics is fight. That is there at that particular point. But the core message of the Bhagavad Gita is not fight. The core message of the Bhagavad Gita is harmonize with Krishna. Align the human will with the divine will. Now, how that human will is aligned with the divine will, that depends on context. And in that particular context, it is fight. So if we consider at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna speaks, he doesn't say, I will fight. He will say, I will do your will. Karishye vachanam tava. Karishye vachanam tava. I will do your will. So, most of our acharyas, not most, almost all of our acharyas have emphasized this universal message. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur wrote his Gita commentary when he was in Vrindavan, and he had come to Vrindavan soon after Aurangzeb had devastated Vrindavan, and most of the work that the Goswamis had done was undone by Aurangzeb. The Goswamis lived more or less at the time of Akbar, and then Aurangzeb came and destroyed much of Vrindavan. Chakravarti Pad came and tried to restore it. So he has seen the devastation caused by religious intolerance. And yet, in his Gita commentary, nowhere does he say that all of you should rise and destroy the Muslims, just as Krishna told Arjuna to fight against the Kauravas. He doesn't go in that direction. Now that doesn't mean that we shouldn't fight against intolerance, but the Gita is not being weaponized for that purpose. His focus is on what? The universal message of the Gita, that we should develop love for Krishna. So, for us, the specifics today, what the Gita specifics at that particular time, so this is, say, 5,000 years ago. So 5,000 years ago, the specific was fight. Now, for us today, the specific would mean chant. And this is a Yuga Dharma, chant and inspire others to chant. Remember Krishna and help others to remember Krishna. So see, why am I giving this example? This is a provocative example that sometimes the specifics are not as important as the universals. So Prabhupada in his commentary does not go too much into the specifics of the Kurukshetra war. That is there in the first chapter, second chapter, but afterwards he focuses on the philosophy, the universals. So therefore, the specifics of a particular time may be important to understand what is being taught and how it is to be applied at that time. But the specifics may not be important in general. So similarly, if we go to here, apply this, the Virat Rupa. The Virat Rupa, the details, they are the specifics. They make sense to Parikshit Maharaj at that particular point. Now, what is the universal principle? The universal principle is through matter to Krishna. That we live in the material world, and from the material world, we don't have to turn away from matter to go towards Krishna. Through matter, we can go towards Krishna. Now, how might that approach apply in today's world? So, that's something which we have to consider contextually. So, I'll give a couple of examples of this. So, for example, today, we might use the concept of science, modern science. Now, even in modern science, as science has studied and explored the universe around us, it has found so much harmony, symmetry, intricacy, that it is actually, for any thoughtful person, there is some indication that there must be some higher order. There must be some bigger reality in the world. So, I think it is Kelvin who said that a little of science takes a person away from God, but immersion in science brings people back to God. So the idea is, today in the world, we might find three things which point us to His glory. We look at the universe, we find harmony in the universe, we find intricacy in the universe, and we find symmetry in the universe. So this points to His glory. Now I'm not going to go into each of these, but I'm giving this as an example that we may study how today when we look at the universe, we may think about how, okay, the carbon dioxide is increasing in the planet. So how the carbon dioxide oxygen balance is managed naturally. It's such a remarkable balance. How is this balance being done? There has to be some higher arrangement over there. And from there, we can remember Krishna. So, from which specifics we go toward the universals, that depends. Now, if somebody has a lot of interest, like somebody has an interest in Bhagavatam cosmology specifically, then they can try to understand the specifics at that time, and they can remember Krishna through those specifics also. But everybody does not have to go into the elaborate details of the specifics of a particular time and a particular conception that was prominent at that time. If we look at the 5th canto purports of Shrimad Bhagavatam given by Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada is not elaborately explaining the specifics. Prabhupada is focusing on the universal principles of bhakti. And in this particular purport also, Srila Prabhupada is doing the same thing. So, let's, now we move toward the takeaway. So I'll give a couple of examples of how we can make sense of some of the specifics. So till now what I said is that the universal is remember Krishna. The specific is, at that time some specific knowledge was there. Through that knowledge we can remember Krishna. Now today some specific knowledge might be there, and through it we can remember Krishna. So to give another example of this, say right now our class is happening in English. Now the Bhagavatam is in Sanskrit. So Sanskrit is a specific language, English is a specific language. The message of Krishna consciousness is a universal message. Now does everyone who studies Bhagavatam, does everyone have to understand Sanskrit? No, not necessary. So if we understand English, through the specific medium of English language, we can understand the universal message of the Bhagavatam. If somebody doesn't understand English, Then we may have Telugu translation, we may have Hindi translation. So the specifics can be many. From whichever specific, we can approach Krishna. So now, of course, if somebody has the interest, can they study the Sanskrit? Of course they can. Can somebody study Bengali? Of course they can. So the specifics that are there at the point of origin or a point of significance for a tradition, understanding those specifics can be helpful. It can be helpful, but it is not necessary. I hope this difference is clear. So now with this understanding, the takeaway will be, we'll give a couple of examples of how this universal is remember Krishna. This universal can be approached from the Bhagavatam specific, and how this universal can be approached from today's specifics. So specific refers to that which is a detail, something which is known at that particular point. So let's look at the verse that is under discussion right now. And so the verse said that when the sense of thirst and hunger was created, that became activated within the living being by the activation of the universal force or the universal form, then the mouth, the sensory organ, opened. Let's look at the verse once again, and let's look at some of the points in the purport. So, pranek shapita kshutrud. Kshutrud is hunger and thirst. Akshipata is agitated. So when the agitation happened, then prana mukham nirabhidyata. So the first line is pran, the last line is prana, and mukham abhivadyata. So the idea is that there is a need felt inside. The need is what? Oh, I am hungry, I am thirsty. And the need has to be fulfilled. So how is the need fulfilled? Then, okay, the mouth is opened so that some food, some drink can be taken. Now, what does Prabhupada say in the purport? Prabhupada is not going too much into the specifics of the specifics of those times. Prabhupada is giving some specifics of our times. He is talking about, one is, say, developmental psychology and developmental biology. So he says that the process by which all living beings in the womb of the mother develop their sense organs and sense perceptions appears to follow the same principle in the case of the Virat Purusha, the sum total of all living entities. So the idea is that even a small baby, Prabhupada talks about the Virat Rupa has a mouth and we all have mouths. So when we feel hungry, what do? If a small baby feels hungry, the baby first opens its mouth to cry. And when the baby opens its mouth to cry, the mother will bring some food, maybe the bottle, or the mother, still baby in the breastfeeding stage, and the mother will offer something in the mouth so that the food can be taken. So now we may say, where is Krishna over here? Is this simply a mundane activity? Well, yes and no. Yes, it is mundane in the sense that a person might do it with completely mundane consciousness. Oh, my baby is crying, let me give the baby some food. That's true. But if we consider, if nature has come about simply by unguided random forces, then it is remarkable that as many living beings are there with the kind of food that they need. That kind of food is already there in nature. See, when a baby comes out from the mother's womb, and the mother offers her breast milk, that's one of the most intimate acts of love. At the same time, did the mother do anything special to produce milk in her breasts at that time? No. The same God who sent the child into the world through the mother's womb also sent God to also send milk in her breast so that that child could be nourished. So while there is a specific, the baby is crying and the baby is being breastfed, but from the specific we can see the universal, that there is a higher arrangement, there is the higher hand of God. So the specifics can be seen and they need to be seen. I said start with knowledge begins with what is. But from what is, we need to also look at what it means. So the specifics are important, but from there, the universal is important. Now Prabhupada goes further and says that the desires for all kinds of sense perception, sense organs exist in the Supreme, and thus they take place in the individual person also. So now let's try to understand a little bit more of what is the Virat Rupa. Okay. Can I go for 10 minutes more? Okay. Thank you. So now in many ways the term Virat Rupa and the term Vishwa Rupa, they are sometimes used interchangeably. However, while the terms may be interchangeable, they are not exactly the same. The same term can refer to two distinct things. So there is a Virat Rupa in the Gita, where it is primarily often main word used is the Vishwa Rupa over there. And there is a Virat Rupa in the Bhagavatam, where more often the term Virat Rupa is used much more than the Vishwa Rupa. Now while the term may sometimes be the same, actually the concept is very different. So if you consider there's a suitcase. Now the suitcase has a handle and the suitcase has a body. So now, I was once in Florida and I was traveling with a suitcase, and the suitcase, I was about to go to the airport, my suitcase broke. Or the suitcase somehow cracked and it broke. So we didn't have time to buy another suitcase. So the host gave me another suitcase over there. And then I went. Now normally when I travel, because of my physical limitations, I don't carry my suitcase. Somebody else is, either the host or the wheelchair assistant, they carry the suitcase. So now when I landed, from there I was going to Atlanta, and I landed in Atlanta, I had forgotten what my suitcase looks like. So I only remembered the handle. I remembered that the handle was blue in color. So at that time with the wheelchair assistant, I was taking out all the suitcases with blue handles and then checking whether this is my suitcase or this is not my suitcase. So what I'm telling over here is that the handle and the suitcase, the same handle might be there for many suitcases, isn't it? So the handle is like the term. The suitcase itself is the concept. So the same term might be used for many concepts. Like in English, the same word can have many different meanings. Like the word run, English has 540 plus meanings. I am going for a run. I am running because my car has stopped running. I am running away from this country because this person is running for president. So the same word can have many different meanings. So it's important to understand what meaning is being considered at a particular time. Now I was in UK and there was a youth session. A lot of animated question answers were there. And the youth were asking me challenging questions. I tried to answer as well as I could. And after that the organizer came and he had a big smile on his face. He says, "Prabhu, you killed it." I said, "What did I kill? And if I killed something, why are you happy about it?" So, now you killed it. The word kill, there it does not refer to physically killing someone. It means you did something wonderful. It comes actually from a hunting metaphor. In the past, hunting would be a sport. And if somebody will shoot and kill, hey, you killed it, that means well done. So now it has become well done. So words have different meanings. So the word Virat Rupa in the Bhagavad Gita and in the Bhagavatam have different meanings. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is a revelation. Revelation means that Krishna reveals. Divyam dadamite chakshu pashyame yogamaishwaram. So revelation means it is top down. It is coming from Krishna to us. In the Bhagavatam, the Virat Rupa is not a revelation. It is a conceptualization. Conceptualization means it is bottom up. In the Bhagavatam, the word is used kalpitaha. Now, kalpitaha is a variant of the word kalpana. Kalpana means imagination, visualization, conceptualization. So, the Virat Rupa in the Bhagavatam is a conceptualization. So, conceptualization means, for example, if somebody sees a huge mountain range, we say this mountain range is like the bones of Krishna. Or we might say that if there's a large water body, that is like the water in the navel of the Supreme. Now there is, if you look at the universe itself, there is Atal, Vital, there are all these 14 planetary systems, there are Ananta Brahmandas, but there is no description of a Virat Rupa Loka. There is no particular planetary system where the Virat Rupa exists. Now, of course, there is, you can say, there is Ananta and he has thousands of mouths. That is true, but that is not exactly the Virat Rupa. So, the Virat Rupa, as described in the Bhagavatam, is a conceptualization. That means the spiritual seeker who is looking at the world, and by looking at the various things in the world, is trying to see how I can remember God. So that's why if you look at the specifics of the Virat Rupa, in different places in the Bhagavatam, some of the specifics are different. In some places, the sun and the moon are said to be like the eyes of the Virat Rupa. But in some places, it is that the whole head of the Virat Rupa is considered to be the topmost planetary system, the Satyaloka. Then sun and moon don't exist in Satyaloka. So this is a correlation between things in the world and the Lord. And that correlation is a conceptualization. So it is not that literally, physically these things are happening. It is a way of remembering the Lord. And so, in this particular verse, the idea is that every time when we feel hunger or thirst, now one way is that we can remember Krishna is the taste of water. That is one way we can remember Krishna when we feel thirsty. But another way is that the very fact that our body is designed in such a way that when there is some need for the body, we feel a sensation in the body. And then outside there are resources to satisfy that sensation. That is actually pointing to an arrangement of the divine. There is the few verses before the Adibhuta, Adidaiva and Adiyagya they are talked about over here. Adhyatma. Adibhuta, Adidaiva, Adhyatma they are talked about over here. So the idea is that the soul exists in three distinct circles. If this is the soul exists in the circle of the body mind, that is the Adhyatma. The soul exists in a social circle, that is the Adhibhuta, and the soul exists in a environmental circle. So these three, the Adhyatma, Adibhuta, and Adidaiva. So now each of these circles is essential for our existence. Now if our body doesn't function properly, then we feel pain, we feel sick, and we can't function. Now if in the society around us there is a lot of unrest, there is political turbulence, there is communal violence, there is war, then we can't function. If there's an earthquake, if there's a cyclone, we can't function. So each of these is required for our existence. And each of these has to exist in a proper way. And that's why in many traditional Vedic prayers, at the end of it is said, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So that Shanti 3 times is said because it is supposed to invoke Shanti at these 3 levels. Om Adhyatmik Klesh Shanti, Om Adhibhautik Klesh Shanti, Om Adidaivik Klesh Shanti. So Ashanti can come, distress and agitation can come from all these 3. From the body, from society, from the environment. And all of these are to be pacified. So when it is said in a previous verse that the universe, that the universal form expands to create all these 3 sustaining circles. Now what does it mean? It doesn't mean that literally that Adibhuta is like one thing that is existing. Adhyatma is one thing that is existing. It's a principle. And that principle has originated from the Lord. So there is a reference, for example, in a few earlier verses to the virya of the Lord. The virya can refer to potency. The virya can also refer to the seminal substance. So now if you see the description over there, it is that the Lord is lying down at the bottom of the ocean, and from there the virya arises, and from there the universe manifests, and the living beings manifest from there. Now clearly, if we look at the way creation occurs in the Bhagavatam, this is not the way the creation literally occurs. There are different sequences described in the Bhagavatam and in different scriptures. But generally this is not the sequence that is described. So it is meant to be more of a symbolic reminder for us that all life is coming from the Lord. All life is sustained by the Lord. That without Him, nothing can exist. So, if you see, so this is the universal principle, 2:10:12. One should definitely know that all material ingredients, activities, time and modes, and the living entities who are meant to enjoy them all, exist by His mercy alone. And as soon as He does not care for them, everything becomes non-existent. So that is the universal principle. Now some specific visualization, some specific tool for remembrance might be there. That's the next verse. The Lord, while lying on His bed of mystic slumber, generated the seminal symbol, golden in hue, through external energy out of His desire to manifest varieties of living entities from Himself alone. So this is describing the very nature of existence in somewhat symbolic substance, symbolic ways. That we exist because the Lord has desire, the Lord has free will, and the Lord has given us desire and free will. And He wants us to exist ultimately in loving harmony with Him. But while we don't want to be in loving harmony with Him, He gives us space to exist in this world. And He has created that space. So this is the specifics from that perspective. Now from our perspective, what does it all mean for us? That when things are happening in our life, now we need to look at the specifics to be attentive. What is happening? Okay, this thing happened, this devotee spoke like this to me, this devotee is upset with me, or I was doing this program and people have stopped coming for this program. So as devotees, we need to be aware of the specifics. But while being aware of the specifics, we should not get completely caught in the specifics. Beyond the specifics is the universal. So what is Krishna teaching me through this? How can I serve Krishna in this situation? So when Prabhupada was trying to share Krishna Bhakti in India and nothing was working, Prabhupada was writing Back to Godhead magazine and trying to distribute it. At that time, one postman told him, Swamiji, you are spending so much effort in writing magazines, people will read and throw away magazines. If you write books, that will last for a much longer time. Now, if Prabhupada had only focused on the specifics, we could have said, who are you? You are just an ordinary postman. What do you know? Now, Prabhupada could have gone on an ego trip. And he said, I am a sannyasi. I am a Uttam Adhikari Mahabhagvat. You think you can give a suggestion to me? Who do you think you are? No. Prabhupada did not get caught in the specifics. Prabhupada looked at the specifics and then the universal. He said, this is Krishna speaking through him. This is my spiritual master speaking through him. So does that mean that anybody gave any suggestion to Prabhupada? Prabhupada started saying that this is Krishna speaking? No. We also have to use our intelligence. What is Krishna's message? When Prabhupada got the dream that he should take sannyas, I conclude with this example. When Prabhupada got the dream that from his guru came and he said, take sannyas. He wrote to one of his godbrothers. And his godbrother said, sannyas? He said, you have been a grahastha throughout your life. You have never been in an ashram. And first, come and stay in our ashram. The ashram leaders will observe your conduct. And after a few years of observation, then we can consider sannyas. Now, we can say that's reasonable at one level, isn't it? Today, if some temple president gets a letter from someone, can you give me sannyas? That would be a reasonable response. But then, did Prabhupada think that, this is Krishna speaking, I will not take sannyas? No, he didn't think like that. He said, he wrote to another godbrother. And his godbrother knew him from a good amount of time. And he said, yes, Swamiji, you should immediately take sannyas. If you want to preach, you should take sannyas, and I'll give you sannyas. So now, which specific points to what universal? That is something we require buddhi. So unless we are ourselves first hearing about Krishna, if we are not adequately hearing about Krishna, we won't be able to see Krishna in the specifics of the world. But when our consciousness is infused with Krishna, with the desire to serve Krishna, then when certain specifics come upon us, we will be able to decide which specific is anukul and which specific is partikul. Which specific I should listen to, and we can do more service over there. And which specific we should not listen to. And we should not do some service over there in that direction. So that's something which we can learn if we have heard about Krishna adequately. So when the devotees were in New York, some devotees told Prabhupada, just as there are all these hippies and counterculture here, there's in San Francisco also. He said, if you come there, you can expand your preaching. So Prabhupada told his disciples, okay, that sounds interesting. You go there, you arrange some programs for me, and I'll come there. And then Prabhupada went there afterwards. Now, at one time, one devotee came and told Prabhupada, at that time, the devotees would do kirtan at various places, they're exploring. So, they went to some nightclubs. And there they were doing kirtans. And some devotees told that there were some inappropriate approaches and some inappropriate advances towards them. So then Prabhupada heard that and Prabhupada said, so when we are going to a particular place, we should think, what is the potential that some people will become devotees over here? So yes, we can go out for kirtan, but go to a place where people will be spiritually receptive. He said, don't go to such places. So which specifics can point us toward Krishna, which specific may not point us toward Krishna? That is something which we all have to learn ourselves. And that is how we can also be Krishna conscious through the things of the world. So I'll summarize what we discussed today. The broad theme we discussed is how the Virat Rupa can enhance our Krishna consciousness. How we can how the Virat Rupa can help us to remember Krishna. And I discuss 3 points. What is the acronym? Chit. C was context. So context is that in the Bhagavatam helps us cultivate Krishna consciousness broadly in 2 ways. That is, bring Krishna into our consciousness and bring our consciousness to Krishna. So the 10th canto Leela, for example, is bring Krishna into our consciousness. The 2nd canto, 3rd canto and 5th canto, that is bring what is in our consciousness to Krishna. So the idea is that whenever we seek knowledge, knowledge is a combination of specifics and universals. What is and what it means. So both, when they are combined in a healthy way, that's when we get proper understanding. So the implication which we discussed over here was that when we are trying to remember Krishna through the world means, we discussed this ladder of abstraction, that there are specifics in the world. So there are ancient specifics and there are current or modern specifics. And there are universals in between. So if we consider, if we do not understand the difference, so for example, if you consider the Gita, in the Gita, the ancient specific is fight. But from the specific, what we have at the top is universal. The universal is surrender to Krishna, is harmonize with Krishna. Now, Gita's message is not fight a war. Gita's message is do God's will. And that could, today the current specific could mean chant, that's the Yuga Dharma. So, the idea over here is that we need to understand this specific, what is the universal principle and how it applies in today's world. So for example, in the Bhagavatam, the Virat Rupa concept is already known to Parikshit Maharaj. Now it is not known to us. So we may not go, so the principle is, in this case, so if we consider, this is the first. The second is Virat Rupa is known to Krishna. In the second, the principle over here is through matter to Krishna. That is the principle. So now today we might apply that through science. We may look at how science has revealed the harmony, intricacy, symmetry in the universe. The various details, they point to some higher organizing principle, something bigger. So we could use it from that perspective. And then we talk about what are the takeaway for us. Takeaway is that we need to know from when to go from specifics to universals and when to go from universals to specifics. So when to do what, that is important. So I gave the example of Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam teaches Krishna consciousness. Now we can go through the specific of Sanskrit that was spoken at that time. We can go through the specific of English. The important thing is that we go toward Krishna. So now most of us will go from here itself. Now some of us may even learn Sanskrit and go from there also. So like that, for most of us in our life, if we consider the Virat Rupa, I discussed that the Virat Rupa is both, in the Gita it's a revelation. In the Bhagavatam it is a conceptualization. So conceptualization means it's a bottom-up approach. It's a way by which we can connect the universe and what we observe in the universe with Krishna. So the specifics at that time, there is talking about, for example, the concept of prana, or the concept of the adhibhuta, adhyatma, adhidaiva. So now, for those whom those concepts are familiar, they can very easily use that to remember Krishna. Now, for those of us, for those whose concepts are not familiar, we can try to get some understanding of those concepts. But even if we can't understand those concepts, we discuss about how Srila Prabhupada, here are two examples of a postman who told him write books. Prabhupada took that specific to move towards the writing of books. And we also talked about Prabhupada's taking sannyas. So one specific he accepted, other specific he did not accept. So we have to have the universal understanding of Krishna consciousness to be able to know which specifics are anukul and which specifics are pratikul. In this way, through our life and through what we encounter in the world also, we can remember Krishna and we can move closer to Krishna. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. So, do we have time for questions? One or two questions anyone has? Adhakant Prabhu has a question.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Prabhuji, when you say the 5,000 years ago, Krishna used the 5 specific to connect to the universal, and currently it is Harinam Sankirtan specific to connect to the universal. In between, Mahatma Gandhi used non-violence as a specific to bring harmony in the society. How do you look at that specific which Gandhi used?
I don't know if he used non-violence to bring harmony. For him, non-violence was more of a principle. So, see, from a non-violence is fine as an individual virtue. We all can learn to be more non-violent in our individual communication, both in terms of speech, in terms of action. But the problem is, non-violence is not a policy for society. Like say, non-violence means forgiveness, justice, understanding. Okay? So now, that, say, if some relative has come to our home, and while they were in our home, they stole something from our home. Now we will be upset, but if we come to know about it and they say, okay, no, actually, I had this crisis and I needed the money, so I took it. I'll give it back to you. Now we may decide we'll forgive. But if the police makes a policy, or the government makes a policy, anybody can go to any shop and steal anything and we'll forgive everyone. That will lead to total chaos. You know, during the pandemic, it happened in California, that they said people are poor. So if anybody goes to any supermarket and if they steal anything below $750, now the police will not even apprehend them. But people were not going and stealing bread and food from there. People were just, Louis Vuitton purses and second-hand iPhones, just below $750. And then they would take it and they would sell it on Craigslist or somewhere like that. So the point is, non-violence. There are two different things over here. Non-violence, it is good as an individual virtue. Yes. But it is not a social or a national policy. It will be very bad. Now Prabhupada says, non-violence for a Kshatriya. See, if you see, Krishna talks about opposite virtues in, I think, 1841 and 1842. For Brahmanas, he says, Shamo damastapa shaucham shantir arjavam evacha. Shanti is peacefulness or forgiveness. So that is what he talks about as for a Brahmana. So for Brahmana, he says, it's a virtue. But then, for a Kshatriya, what he says? Yuddhe chapya apalayanam. That don't flinch from a conflict. Don't flee from a conflict. If a conflict is required, fight. So for Brahmana it is good. For a Kshatriya, it is not. Kshatriyas should be ready to fight. Now for Kshatriyas, Prabhupada says that non-violence can be a strategy. It is not a principle. Strategy means sometimes you may decide that I don't want to fight a war over here. Maybe the opposite side is stronger. There will be too much damage over here. We'll try to avoid it. But it is not a inviolable or non-negotiable principle. Kshatriya means sometimes you have to fight. Sometimes wars have to be fought. Yes, war is hell. But sometimes war is the hell that we have to go through to prevent a far worse hell. So war should never be entered into casually. Violence should not be just nonchalantly done. Violence is never for entertainment. But sometimes it is necessary. So we could say from a socio-political perspective, non-violence was a good strategy because the British were very, very careful about not letting Indians get their hands on gunpowder or on guns. And the way the Jallianwala Bagh massacre happened, 1,000 people coming against 10 people. 10 people with guns can kill 1,000 people. So one reason why Britain lost the American War of Independence was that there was a place called Luxembourg where the British had kept their gunpowder. And both the American revolutionaries and the British soldiers both were trying to reach that place. And the Americans reached first. And that's what completely tilted the war in favor of the Americans. And that's why from that time, because gaining that gunpowder became so decisive for them in maintaining victory, that in America, in their constitution, they had the idea that every citizen should have the right to have guns. And their idea is, it's not that citizens need guns to protect themselves from thieves. They say the citizens should have guns to protect themselves from the government. Because their experience is the government became tyrannical. So the idea is tomorrow if the police becomes corrupt, the citizens should have as good weapons as are required for the police, to kill the police if required. So now, of course, that's like an extreme thing, but America grew on that principle of autonomy. So, but the thing is, Britain learned that lesson from America, and that's why they were very careful that the Indians would not get their hands on weapons. And that's why non-violence as a strategy was sound. Now, how much non-violence contributed to independence? That's open to question. It was when Subhash Chandra Bose allied with the Axis powers, and then the Indian National Army was formed, which rebelled. So according to the UK President Attlee, he said that the main reason why the British left India was because the army rebelled against them. They said that the Quit India movement really didn't play a significant role. That's what he says in his memoirs. But anyway, that is a matter of historical debate. But the point is, see, is non-violence as a socio-political principle at that particular time made sense. But is non-violence the teaching of the Gita? Well, it is one virtue mentioned in a few verses in the Gita. But it is not definitely the core teaching of the Gita at all. So that's why when we quote from scripture, see we quote in context, we quote beyond context. Beyond context means that scripture has universal message which can be applied even when we don't know the context. But there is quoting in context is good, quoting beyond context is also good, but quoting against context. This is sometimes called as out of context. But out of is more against context. So what happened for Gandhi was that his idea that non-violence is the most important principle, that led him to say that actually, if the kind of war that is described in the Mahabharata actually happened, then he said, I will be forever ashamed to be a Hindu. And I would immediately resign from Hinduism. And the way I had read Gandhi's book on the Gita before I came to Bhakti. So he says that with all humility, I submit that Vyasdev is using the war as a metaphor. That the body represents Kurukshetra, and the Kauravas refer to the bad desires inside us, the Pandavas refer to the good desires inside us. But he goes further. He says the Kurukshetra is a metaphor, but I would like to submit that it is a terrible metaphor. So the author has made a terrible mistake by using this metaphor, because this metaphor will be taken literally by people, and people will fight war based on that. And so what has happened is he's saying there's humility, but the audacity is, first of all, he's saying it's only a metaphor. Secondly, it's a bad metaphor. That means basically the author is a bad author. So the author is a bad author, okay, the message is good, but the metaphor is bad. So it is, what is it? It is like violating the text hugely. So there is this term called torture in translation or torture in interpretation. Like sometimes some victim, somebody is arrested, and the police want to frame that person. Frame means, you committed the crime. They say, no, I didn't commit the crime. Beat the person, beat the person, beat the person. Till finally, did you commit the crime? Yeah, I committed the crime. Stop beating me now. So sometimes some people, they screw out meanings from the Gita, which is like torture by translation. Beat the Gita from here, beat the Gita from there, somehow get the Gita to say what you want it to say. That's why Prabhupada said that this is not Bhagavad Gita as it is, this is Bhagavad Gita as you are. Okay? So, thank you very much. Grantraj Shrimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you so much for a wonderful class. We have been struggling to present this 10th chapter of 2nd canto. Of course, our devotees have given nice classes, but your class really wonderful, and you have given very good picture how to understand entire Bhagavatam, and the concept. You have really given very good concept of understanding such a complicated subject. And we can clearly see when you started the class, you have complete picture in front of your eyes, and you have gradually brought point by point and explained us. Prabhuji, thank you so much. And let us chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra in gratitude of Prabhuji's class. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Thank you all very much. And prasadam will be served in 304 for all congregation and brahmacharis in their respective places. Now,
so I have written a couple of books, if you don't mind. So this is Gita for the CEO. So basically nowadays in the corporate world, there's a lot of interest in learning some life lessons or leadership lessons from ancient texts. From Japan, Ikigai is quite popular. From Greek, there's something called Stoicism, which is quite popular. So HarperCollins is one of the biggest publishers in the world, and they wanted me to present the Bhagavad Gita from that perspective. So like I was having some simple diagrams, there are many simple conceptographics, and I presented the whole Gita as a conversation between two people. The Gita itself is a conversation. It's a conversation between two people, both in the corporate world, one who knows the Gita and one who wants to know the Gita. So I talked about how we can make our speech more effective to inspire others, how we can be resilient and face life's reversals with greater confidence, how we can understand our own nature and find our calling in life. So this is not just for CEOs. Ultimately, every one of us is meant to be a CEO of our own life. At the same time, if some of your friends, colleagues, relatives may not be ready to understand the Gita directly, this book can trigger their interest and start their spiritual journey. This is Gita for the CEO, and this is prayers inspired by Bhagavad Gita. So here, I have taken the Gita's verses and rendered them in English poetry so that we can get a devotional feel of more of an emotional connect with the Gita. And then based on the verse, there's a prayer. So there's a 300-word prayer which can be read very easily in one page. And like that, there are different deities of Krishna. And there's also a one-sentence summary, which is like a spiritual affirmation. So there are 122 prayers like that. And many devotees have told me that during the daily chanting, reading one prayer before chanting helps them to calm and center their mind. So like we hear Japa talks, this is like a prayerful reflection. And there is a very accessible table of contents. So there are prayers for various occasions. Say when we are feeling lost or directionless in our life, or when we are feeling lonely and misunderstood, when our desires are becoming wild and uncontrollable, when we are feeling spiritually dry and we are feeling Krishna is far away from us. So there are prayers for various occasions. So you can even look at the table of contents, and whichever prayer resonates with your mood, you can read that. So both these books are available behind, and I'll be here to sign the books if you want, or if you have any further questions. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.